Okay, so hi. Could you please introduce yourself for the lovely YouTube viewership?
Hi, I'm Rachel. Um, and I'm Rachel Tanenhaus. I am sometimes known in some online places as Tikva. Um, what else you want to know? Pronouns she, her, hers.
Thank you. Uh, would you talk a little bit about what you do and your relationship to disability?
Okay. So the first part is that I am not here representing my job.
That is
um,
entirely fair.
so I am giving that disclaimer.
Hmm.
Because I am a public servant, I must give that disclaimer.
Hmm.
Um, And so I have both personal and professional connection with disability. I have a disability myself. I have low vision, and um, I also work in the field of disability. I have done ADA related work for, God, I guess we're up to 20 years now. And also I have a background on public health and disability, specifically the public health of people with issues of people with disabilities, as opposed to disability as a public health outcome, which is not what I do.
Right.
But as people with disabilities as a discrete population with particular public health needs, that I do.
Great. Thank you. And if you could then talk a little bit about your relationship to board games and the board game community.
So I wouldn't say that I am in the board game community, but I definitely hang out with some of it. And we have a games night that happens sometimes at our house, or did before the plague.
Mm.
We had a monthly games night at our house, and I live with, we have, I don't know, we might actually have more board games than socks in this house, and we have 4 humans in this house. So, and we all, and none of us are like barefoot activists or anything like that. So, it's we have a lot of board games in this house. And I know lots of people who love board games, and I occasionally like to play board games, but sometimes that is an issue. We also have friends who are game designers and in the industry and such, and sometimes, like, for example, I mean, I had nothing to do with it, but Spirit Island was play tested a lot at our board game nights, and now it is, the hotness. So a well-deserved hotness, I might add. But sometimes something
Yeah.
is the new hotness, and it's like, really? But no, actually, from what I understand, this is a worthwhile hotness.
Yeah. I am considering doing an episode of this show about Spirit Island and colonialism. Um, so,
Yes.
so yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, given that, and you say that you sometimes are able to play the board games, but not always.
Right.
So, what does it take for you to be able to play a board game? Like, what are the
So,
characteristics?
okay, and I'm speaking for myself here because there's some people for whom this would not work.
Hmm.
I Aside from all the usual stuff about it has to be the kind of game I like, which
Right.
is right there. Like I'm not a huge strategy person or anything like that. That's just not how my brain happens to work. That's not disability related. That's just how I roll.
Certainly.
No pun intended. The
Always intend your puns.
Okay, well, I mean, not all games have dice. Um, so in any case, um, a lot of games have very small print or like swirly fancy fonts, or have things that require being able to see see far distance, if even if it's across the board, or be able to tell what somebody else is doing visually. Or there's a lot of playing boards. They're very pretty, but they don't have great contrast. It's very hard for me to tell what's going on where. Um, so, like, for example, I can play Monopoly. I know that is not the game that anybody at any of your games nights is playing, but I can play Monopoly. But as it happens, I own a large print and Braille version of Monopoly. I don't use Braille, but the large print is great, and so I can play that better. There are games that I can play as long as people verbalize what they are doing. So there are games that I play fine as long as we have some house rules about verbalization. For example, I can play Flux, but somebody else needs to tell me what card they just lay down. And that's relatively easy to do. If you've seen people play like Uno, again, probably not the games you're talking about, but Uno is relatively easy to play if you can see it all, because like
Bright
everything
colors,
is,
big contrast,
it's
large
huge,
font.
right? So if somebody puts something down, they can just say, put it down like red 5, okay, and now we know, right? So, and it doesn't have to be a big deal about, well, I'm doing this thing for Rachel. It can just be the thing people do automatically. So I can play guillotine, as long as people tell me what they are putting down, what they
And
are
and
putting
that's a
down. And I
game
may,
with low contrast and swirly fonts, but as long as you know what it is.
but the pictures are really pretty big.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, that having been said, people need to tell me when they're laying something down. And sometimes I will point to a card and be like, I don't remember what that says. Can you tell me what that says? Um, so it's a large enough game that I can get by, but somebody with worse vision than mine, and there are people who have that, is not going to be able to play guillotine.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
uh, Somebody bought large print code names for me, and that was so exciting because I've never, like, the only way I've been able to play code names is if someone texts me everything that's been laid out on the,
Mm.
that's been laid out there, and then I have it to refer to, but everybody else can just look over there. There are plenty of games that are, accessible for me, but they sometimes are not the ones that are, um, when Dominion was the big thing that everybody was playing. That looks like a lot of fun, but I cannot play that game.
Right, because all the cards kind of look the same.
Right. It's like, I mean, like, I managed to muddle through playing Magic back in the day, but those things are even more swirly than Magic cards.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned that you know some board game designers and have them coming over to your house and playtesting things. Has anybody ever adapted or designed a game with you in mind or for you?
That would be so cool. Usually by the time, I mean, honestly, a lot of the time they already have their idea, right? But yeah, that makes such a difference when you build accessibility into it. And like if it's done as part of the fabric of what you're doing, first of all, it's not a big deal, right? You don't have to like glom it on like a freaking barnacle. I mean, you know what happens to barnacles? They get scraped off. Nobody wants a barnacle, and nobody wants to be a barnacle. Even barnacles aren't happy about it. So, um, you have to, if it's part of what you're doing, that as many people as possible are able to play this thing, or you want to make it accessible to people regardless of how they get their information. And that doesn't mean you can't use particular methods of giving information. It's just you need more of them,
Hmm.
right? Like, so I don't know. Yeah, sorry. Hi, Echo says hi. Um, I don't know. I have had people say to me, what would make this work for you? But at that point, usually it's what would have made this work for you rather
Right.
than how can I make my new game design work for you?
So, since Echo is introducing herself, do you want to take a moment to talk about her?
Oh yeah, Echo. Sorry, Echo is my guide dog. Um, she is a standard poodle. She is very full of herself right now because I know, why is this night different from all other nights? But she is very full of herself right now because she just came back from the groomers. This is a new groomer who gave her a bow and a bandana. And
Oh, she
hey,
must be
Echo, come
so
here.
pleased with herself.
Oh my goodness, she really, oh, did her bow come off? I guess her bow must have come off, but she's definitely got the bandana. Let me see if we can. Hey, Echo, say hi.
Hi, Echo. Hello,
Echo,
pretty
sit,
girl.
sit. Good
Oh, what a nice
girl.
bandana you have.
Yeah, yeah, good girl. Oh, what a good girl. What do you have on your face? What's on your face? You got schmutz. Anyway, so yeah, sorry. Yeah, so
Well, that kind of
she
leads
does
me
not
in.
play board games.
I wonder what it would take.
Yeah, probably thumbs, but maybe not. Maybe not.
A food-based board game.
Yeah, she actually is not at all food motivated, but there are games for dogs that are fairly mentally challenging. I mean, if you're a dog, and she does like those.
Um, so speaking of having a guide dog,
Yes.
one of the things that a couple other people I've talked to about this have mentioned is the setting in which board gaming happens and
Yeah.
having that be accessible. Do you ever have problems because you have a guide dog getting to places that you want to go for gaming? And obviously this
Yeah.
isn't an issue right now,
Right. No, I'm
but
not going anywhere. But if it's in someone's house and they don't want dogs in their house, like, it's their house, right?
mhm.
So, I'm not gonna, I think people understand why I have my dog, and I think that people are, um, realize that I'm not just bringing her around for funsies, but I also know that people like to be able to breathe in their own homes, and that is legit. The ADA does say that breathing is a major life activity, um, although it doesn't cover private homes. But so sometimes it's just all right, am I able to be welcome with my dog in this space? Or like if they've got like really aggressive cats, or cats that, or more to the point, if Echo is really interested in their cats, that can be an issue too. But also, is it on public transportation? Can I get there? Right? Or is somebody willing to give me a ride? And there's a certain amount of, okay, but if I'm not having a good time anymore, my ride is, then what happens? So I appreciate rides from people, but I am also wary of having that be the only way I can get out of a place or into a place, mostly out of.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so also, if I'm going to a place and I haven't been there before and I'm getting there on my own power, then I have been known to get lost on occasion. I am not somebody who is frightened by getting lost. I was raised by somebody who can see just fine and gets lost all the time, and so it was just a normal part of life. Like, we always got home eventually, but it it helps if I am able to navigate to the place. Um, if it's got, I did go to somebody's game night once, and it was it was winter, and it had snowed, and nobody had cleared that person's steps.
Hmm.
And that meant it was fairly dangerous for me uh, trying to get to their house, because there was a lot of ice, and I can't really see the ice very well. And so, it probably wasn't great for anybody, but for me, I really was not comfortable navigating. And so I had a lot of trouble getting in and then getting back out. Um, and so whether or not someone can like enter your home is definitely and obviously there are other places, board games take place in other places as well. Um, but it's important that people be able to access them, or else they simply aren't going to feel particularly welcome. They're going to feel like, oh yeah, I was just sort of an afterthought.
Have you ever gone to a more public gaming venue?
Sure. I well, one of my partners used to work at Your Move Games, and also at Pandemonium, and they did have gaming tables there, so I have certainly been to those places. Um, the Let's see, the Joko Cruise has a 24-hour gaming room. Most of the cons I've been to have a gaming room. That tends not to be where I hang out, because honestly, it is easier to get my needs met by people who already know me and are used to me. And gaming with strangers is a whole nother set of, is a whole, like, people might be cool about it, but they might not. So that is an amount of stress that if I'm already out in a public place, I am. But sometimes people are good about it. So it really depends on who's there. Um, Sometimes you feel like, sometimes you have the energy to explain your stuff, and sometimes you just want to like kick back and play a game.
Do you mind talking a little bit about what not being chill about it and not being willing to help you looks like?
Yeah, some people, when you ask for what you need, they say no. And there are people who are they don't like changes in their game, or they find it annoying to have to verbalize things, or in some cases they forget, and then when you remind them, they may not be great about it.
Mhm.
Um, and finding people you game well with is sort of a thing in and of itself, right? So
Right.
it's one more aspect of it, but I think that there are, you know, I feel like it is another form of sometimes there are people who don't play well with others, but they actually came to play.
Right. Do you feel like there are any sort of like social norms or venue rules that would be nice to have in place so you don't have to think about it in certain ways?
Well, in my home, for example, the social norm and venue rule is that if, I mean, there are several, but one of them is that if somebody has an access need, we do our best to, and wants to play a game that they are able to play with that access need met, we do our best to meet it. We do not give them a hard time about it. And if there is anybody who is interested in playing the game that they are able to play, let's make that happen, because we want to make sure that person, that person is part of we. This is not like, inclusion is not, and I said something about this in a meeting yesterday, inclusion is not we are including this person. It is this person is part of the we in the first place. Right.
That
So,
is a nice philosophy, and I wish more people would espouse it,
oh yeah, I'm a fan of
just in
that too. But I
general.
mean, yeah, right. But we're not ticky boxes.
Mhm.
Right. So, oh yeah, I included someone because like I wasn't a complete jerk about their access needs. I mean, yay. But
Woohoo,
but
minimum
people
bar
are also
crossed.
sorry.
Woohoo, minimum bar met.
Right, right. But also like some people, I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Mhm.
Right. And some people have never had to deal with this issue before. They have never gamed with somebody who had a disability that needed accommodating. I'm not going to say they've never gamed with somebody with a disability. They have totally gamed with somebody with a disability, but that, whose needs they knew about, and that could be accommodated during the game, and that needed to be accommodated during the game. So I have had people be kind of jerky about when I say this is the thing I need to be able to participate in the game, and they have been like, well, no. And it's not, I need you to make the game so I can cheat and win. It's not, I need you to make the game easier so I can play it or whatever, although there are places for that, but that's not for me. That's not what I'm asking for. But like, really, is it that hard to read things out loud? So, yeah.
So back to sort of a set of venue questions. Have you
Yeah.
ever attempted to game online?
Yes, for varying definitions of game.
Okay. Well, what kind of gaming online have you done?
Okay. I do best with cooperative kinds of things. I'm not good at strategy. I'm not good at like, I mean, I am a competitive person, but there's some kind of competition I'm just not going to do well with if I have to be able to see it well.
Mhm.
Um, I, so I used to be, and this is back, God, I don't know, however many years, 6 years ago, I didn't lose a year of my life, but I spent a year of my life in an online MMO called Glitch. And it was the best thing ever. And I miss it terribly. And the world needs it desperately right now. But also, nobody does Flash-based games, and those are terribly inaccessible to begin with. I squinted. That is how I got through Glitch. Um, and it was amazing. And people who played it speak of it with great love. Um, that is, but there, you didn't win that game, right? You just played it.
Right, it's an MMO, so.
Right, right. And you didn't have to fight people or whatever. I mean, that is, if that's how you get your yayas, that is fine. There is nothing wrong with like, it is very therapeutic to beat the crap out of things, right? But like, that was not my particular thing. If there is something that works well, if it works with my assistive technology, that is very useful. I do not use screen readers. So people who do have, significantly more exact needs that the game really does need to work with, in ways that are not as much of an issue for somebody who uses a screen enlarger. And so somebody who was completely blind could not have played Glitch, for example. And I was very much aware of that. That made me sad because I wanted everybody to play it. And so I've done that sort of online gaming. I have I've played, I think I played Free Civ with some folks, and you can blow that up and make that big enough to do a thing, right?
Hmm.
Do I spend a ton of time playing online games? No, that's kind of hard. There's usually a lot of fiddly small stuff, and that's very visual, and my hand-eye coordination is not great. I do know a lot of I do know gamers with disabilities. There is actually a community of some communities of gamers with disabilities, and I'm not really part of it. Um, but and then I can do like group games. Like I can, if people verbalize things and I use a large enough screen, I can do like Jackbox games or something like that if I get real close to
Hmm.
the screen, or if I'm using a, not my phone, but like a tablet or something like that. Um, I've played um, I've played Space Team, which is chaotic amazingness.
Yeah,
But
I
again,
wonder if anyone would mention Space Team.
yeah, I love Space Team. But I mean, as long as I'm in a place where I'm allowed to swear, because I cannot play that game and keep a clean mouth, there's just I don't think it's possible. I'm sure they've given that game to 8-year-olds who just suddenly like spontaneously started saying words they may never have heard before. Um, but in any case, I love that game. But again, you cannot play that game if you cannot see the screen at all.
Hmm.
And come to think of it, that is a hard game to play if you are deaf, unless people are also signing
Right,
or are also, unless messages are going out to everybody, which is not part of how that game works.
right. So I guess that brings me around to my next sort of direction of questions. Since you have a lot of knowledge, having worked with ADA stuff and the disabled community in a number of ways, I wonder, we've been talking a lot about what works for you, but would you have anything to recommend on sort of what works for different types of disability and for disabled community? What might make things more accessible for people with total blindness or deafness or mobility issues or things like that?
Sure. But the first overarching cross disability thing I'm going to say is that I'm a big fan of the slogan, "Nothing about us without us." If you want something done right, you have to include actual people with disabilities in it and get folks' input from the beginning throughout the design phase and throughout the implementation, and then have folks play test it. And there is a long and ugly tradition of making people with disabilities do work for little or no money that you would pay people without disabilities to do. So if you pay your testers, or if you compensate people, basically, because um, despite the fact that it is in fact legal in this country to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage, that doesn't mean you should be the person doing that. Um, so if you are an actual game company and you have like paid play testers and stuff, don't just be like, "Hey, do you know any blind people who can like poke at this right now?" And like, I don't know, we'll say thank you. Um, Thank you don't pay the rent. So that is one thing. But absolutely always include people with disabilities in your game design, even if you're not like, "I am designing a game for people with disabilities," because hopefully you're saying, "I am designing an awesome game." And in that case, you want people to play it, and you would like as many of people as possible to be able to play it. And we like to play awesome games. We don't want to just play crappy ones. So I think that is something that you should keep in mind. But in terms of some tips, it helps, particularly if you're talking about something electronic in nature, it helps to have um, multiple ways of getting information across. But that's true for non-electronic stuff too. For example, if the way you do things is with color, um, even people without disabilities, there's like 1 in 8 dudes have red-green color blindness. It's very, very common. And for some reason, red and green tend to be colors that indicate things and are used a lot to indicate specific information. And so if there is more than one way that you convey that information, not just through color, maybe that's also like a dotted line rather than a straight, like a solid line or something like that. And maybe there's some other sort of way to tell, a non-visual way to tell the information that that is conveying, or something that can be picked up by a screen reader better than say this is a color. You know, maybe everything that is like they do on forms, where everything that's required to be filled out can be in red, but also, by the way, there's an asterisk. And it doesn't scream, we did this for the people with disabilities. It's just there. All right. Likewise, when you are giving information, and you can have stuff available that people can toggle on and off. Like if you have some sort of auditory, if you've got like a dialogue going on between characters in a video game, have a transcript, like not a transcript, but have captions for it. And you can have them turned on and off if people want them. You know, likewise, I find audio description in movies very, very, very useful, and it can be useful to toggle on in, you know, a video game. But I miss like a lot of video games are gorgeous and lush, and I miss a lot of the stuff because like everything is like it's beautiful, but I can't tell what's happening other than it's pretty. Likewise, there are if there's a lot of fiddly fine motor coordination, that is something, maybe there's more than one way to do that sort of thing. Not everybody can use a mouse, so it helps if there are keyboard controls. Looking at things, at getting information, you know, when you're getting information, look at things like contrast and font size. Do you have to make all of your font large font? No, but you need to make it play nicely with the settings on people's computers that let them adjust the font, right? If you put that in there, that's great. You know, if you put in large font, hey, I surely will never complain about large print. But what some people do is they have their own settings, and so don't make your designer things so they override other people's settings. If you've got a board game, you have many options for tactile things. There is Braille, it does exist, but most blind people do not read it. So for those people for whom Braille is important, it is very important. It is essential for their life, and I am not dissing Braille, but I am saying that about 10% of blind people read Braille. So feel free to include Braille. In fact, please do, but also have other options available. If you're seeing a theme here, it's because redundancy is actually very useful for these things. I recommend looking at principles of universal design or inclusive design, which apply not just to buildings, but to many other things, including education, and since we're at it, game design. And but the principles of universal design, they are aspirational in nature, but they are a nice guideline as can different people with different experiences use the thing that I have worked hard to produce. There are many people with cognitive and learning disabilities who like to play games, and that is something to keep in mind. Cognitive and learning disabilities are not the same thing, but there are people with psychiatric disabilities who will appreciate very much if you can have content warnings. In fact, even without may appreciate the content warnings. They are not just the thing that like they are the right thing to do, basically. They're the right thing to do. And they don't hurt anybody.
Right.
Most importantly. And if you can't do the thing that helps people but doesn't hurt anybody, like, I don't know what to say about your game design is the least of your problems. So those are some examples. There is actually, I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds for just a second.
Sure, please.
So there is, and I'm a little bit of a nerd about these things, so I apologize, but not really. There is a federal law called Section 508 of the Rehab Act that applies to technology, to information technology and electronic technology that is either produced by or procured by the federal government. And there's a lot of people talk about 508 compliance, but that's the only place where that law actually applies. But the cool thing is the folks who came up with standards for it, they didn't just say, okay, like your website needs to be XYZ font, for websites, and you need to have this kind of font and this kind of, what they did was they said, there is technology that these standards are going to have to apply to that we can't even imagine yet. So we need to have a whole set of standards over here that are just functional standards. It has to be able to do X, Y, and Z. You have to be able to interact with it in whatever way, in X, Y, and Z ways, no matter what it is, right? Because like 20 years ago, nobody had heard of like an iPhone with a touch screen,
Right.
right? But Apple went ahead and made a way to make that accessible in when nobody would really have thought of how that would happen. You have to be able to roll with it, but you don't know what people are going to come up with. And they didn't want to have to, I mean, they rewrite some of the standards every now and then, but they know that that is a huge, I mean, it's a government entity. It's like turning a cruise ship, right? So they they said we want to at least have these functional standards that apply to the technology no matter what it is and when it is. And I feel like that is the sort of thing that it would be great if they wrote these things in plain English, but they wrote them in standard. And standards are never written plainly, unfortunately. Um, but it is helpful to look at that sort of thing. And it talks about getting information to people in multiple ways, whether they can see or hear or use their hands or whatever the thing is that they, and I feel like in particular for folks who are doing video games, but also, and for folks who are doing any kind of hardware, computer or electronic hardware, that's really useful stuff to at least keep in mind. But also just keeping the concepts in mind, even if you are doing something like a board game, a card game, something like that. It's not going to be a one-to-one application, but just keeping stuff in the back of your head.
That's great. And please don't apologize for nerding out. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
That's true. This is kind
So,
of like a nerd thing, isn't it?
this is absolutely a nerd thing.
Woohoo!
In fact, I would love it if you want to. I don't know how intense this would be in terms of your time, but if you want to, I would love to sort of get your summary in plain English, as it were, of that 508 compliance stuff.
Yes. I can take a look at, I mean, I don't have it in front of me right now.
Hmm.
I can bring up a window with it and take a look at it real quick. Yeah, actually, this is just a little, I have a little list. All right, so here it is. I found it. Let me know when you want me to start.
Go right ahead.
All right, so I'm looking at the section 508 standards as revised, and I'm looking at section 301, chapter 3 in particular, functional performance criteria. And so talks about, then section 302 says, it starts out with 302.1 and it says without vision. So it says when you've got a visual way of operating the thing, it says a visual mode of operation is provided, blah, blah, blah. When you've got a visual way of running the thing, then the information and communications technology shall provide, so that's the technology, the thing you're making, shall provide at least one mode of operation that does not require user vision. So basically, when you provide something that you need to be able to see, you got to provide a way to do the thing without being able to see. Then it has the same thing for limited vision. When you provide something that has to be able to see, where you have to be able to see, you have to provide at least one way to do it, where you can do it if you don't see very well. Same with perception of color. You need to have at least one way to get the information or to do the thing that does not require being able to perceive color. You need to have a way, when you provide something that requires hearing, you have to have a way to do it that means that you can do without being able to hear, or with limited hearing, and with limited hearing in this case. If you have some sort of speech input or control or operation, you need to have at least one way to do the thing that doesn't require being able to talk, or talk clearly, or talk well, or whatever. When you've got some sort of manual way of doing things, you need to have at least one way of doing things that doesn't require fine motor control or being able to do two things at the same time with your hands. And same with limited reach and strength. If you've got some sort of manual way of doing things, then, and manual doesn't mean not electronic, it literally means you're using your hands. You need to be able to do the thing with limited reach and limited strength. And then there is something about limited language, cognitive, and learning abilities. And this one is a little trickier with gaming and such, but these particular functional standards talking about providing features that can be used by people with limited cognitive, language, and learning abilities, making it easier and simpler. to be able to do it. Does that have to be the default for it? No, although we always appreciate being being included in the people the world is designed for, because we generally aren't, right? I have known since I was born that the world was not made for me. It was not designed for me. Um, so how, being participating in something where in fact I am part of the group of people who were included in the design, part of the people they meant me. I'm not just an add-on. That
No
is,
barnacles.
yeah, right. That is a big deal. That sends a message, and it makes me feel generally more positive about. And I don't want to play. I mean, I might, but I don't want to play the special game for the special people, right? Special means segregated.
Hmm.
Special almost always means segregated, and it's usually used when you don't really want to say the real word, right? You hear about kids with special needs. I've never met a kid without them. I mean, they tend to have them. So do people. And that's the other thing I want to make clear. There's this idea like people with disabilities are the only people out there with needs, and everybody else goes through their life without needs, and we're the needy ones. And I'm here to tell you that everybody who is human, whether they
Hmm.
have a disability or not, has needs. Just ours are considered stranger or more of a pain in the ass or whatever. But like, for example, my friends who are totally blind cheerfully go about their lives sometimes without turning the lights on in their house, and you would not be able to function there.
Right.
you know you have needs. You have a need for light. You probably also have a need for things like air. So does everybody else, but nobody thinks it's a big deal.
Right. I live in a world that in many ways is designed for me. Some ways it's not.
Right, yeah.
But it's just sort of a question of where we draw the line between we and
Right.
they,
I think if we acknowledge that disability is a normal part of human existence and experience,
which it is.
and we do that in actions, not just words, like if you live long enough, you will acquire a disability, and it beats the alternative. So welcome to the group.
Hmm. Um, I'm really I'm still thinking over this 508 bit. I think that's great because it's
508 is not generally my model for a good law or a good rule, but that particular
yeah,
portion
but like
is
a
very
nice
useful.
little list of the
Yeah.
things you need to consider having
Yeah.
functional is a
Yeah.
really nice place to start, because a lot of people just get overwhelmed thinking, oh, what are all the things I don't know,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that's really useful.
Many wheels have already been invented, and I appreciate that.
Right,
Like, I'm not above
exactly.
stealing.
um, okay, is there anything else related to sort of disability and board game or board game spaces that you want to talk about?
I'm gonna say that board game spaces, and people are probably not gonna love this statement, tend to be default um, white dude spaces, and so they tend to cater to what's good for white dudes. I don't even want to say able-bodied white dudes, because there are a lot of folks who play board games who are not neurotypical. Um, but a little of that. Also, I mean, I guess I meant non-disabled. And
Hmm.
it's not everybody who does this who is not non-disabled, but there are some aspects of mainstream and particularly white dude geek culture that focus on, well, the things that make me weak and strange will be engineered away. And so thank you, Jonathan Colton. And I so there is this idea when you get into something that is a foundation, a pillar of the geek world, um, that disability is a thing that maybe we shouldn't have to deal with, because eventually we're not going to have, like, it's not supposed to happen anyway. And also there was a certain amount in some parts of geek culture, a glorification of suffering, like, that, like, we had to you know we had to crawl on broken glass through the halls of MIT, and by God, you'll do it too, kind of thing. That's just because you did it doesn't make it a good idea. So,
Here, here.
you know, so there's this sort of, well, I don't know, why should we make things easier for you? You're not. You're making it level for me. And there's a lot of really bright people who play games, and maybe they didn't always want things to be level. And I mean, as a group, not individuals, but as a group, white dudes have a lot invested in things not being level. Just because, like, when you have the power, giving it up, when you have the power, sharing it feels like a loss.
Right.
So the idea that you have to accommodate people um, is not, there are several, and when I say cultures, I don't mean ethnicities. There are several cultures, like, for example, you know, intensive capitalist culture like Wall Street or whatever, where accommodation, this is a competition,
Right.
right? You know, if you, I don't want to make things easier for you. And I think that there's the potential for so much, like we have so much potential to make things right for people in geek culture such as it is. And that is also the kind of thing that tends to, like, make it very, you know, our reluctance to do so is the kind of thing that tends to make it extremely white and extremely male dominated, is that we don't like to look at this, at the people who are not included. Like, we don't like to think of that as our problem.
Right.
Um, but really, honestly, my disability is not my problem. I don't particularly care that I have a disability, and I recognize that my experience as somebody with a fairly stable disability that is not progressive, and also as somebody who was born disability fabulous and did not acquire it over time, my experience is extremely different. But for me, from people who have acquired their disabilities and require an adjustment to that part of their life, but for me, like, I don't care. 95% of my problems around having a disability are other people. And I like people, so I really wish it weren't like that. Um, so I feel like we have the potential to do really good, welcoming, inclusive stuff in the community, but sometimes instead um, we pathologize difference so much that we don't realize that difference is actually naturally the way things are, and it's not something that needs to be engineered away. It's something that we need to make the environment more inclusive. I really believe with all my heart that things like, this is where I say that labels like functioning are useless,
Hmm.
like high functioning and low functioning, because everybody has a situation you can put them in where they are low functioning. And they will, you know, so the question is, what is going on in the environment that is making someone function the way they do? If you make an environment in which the most people can possibly function, you will have more functional people, regardless of what their label or diagnosis is. Sometimes you have people with clashing needs, but you have that anyway sometimes. So yeah.
Okay. Last question that I know I have.
Okay.
If board game design were more inclusive ground up, what do you think that would change about your life?
So I would probably start playing more board games. And I say probably because there's a curve there. Like, I have spent the past, well, Tuesday it'll be 47 years.
Oh, happy
Um,
birthday.
oh, thank you. Um, living in a world where that was not the way things were. And so I haven't internalized board games as this thing I can do easily and have the same kind of fun that everybody else can. I like them. They're fine. It's a way that I have fun with people. It could be a way I had more fun with people. Um, but there's always been barriers in it. And so I am not used to thinking it as something that of it as something that is really relaxing. So that is, it would take time. And I would need, I don't want to say I would need convincing, but I'd need a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Be an
after this
adjustment.
much time, not having the ease of doing those things, it doesn't come naturally to me. So yeah, I think it would make board game nights a lot more fun. I think I would be more excited when people in my household said, "Hey, let's play a game." Um, I think that when people were talking about the games they were playing, I would feel more included and know what the heck they were talking about. Um, but and it's such a huge part of the lives of so many people that I love that it would be really neat. And I think I would feel a lot more included in more than just the gaming.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank
This
you. That was
this
fun.
has
You
been
know I'll
fabulous.
happily
There's so
talk
much
forever.
material here. It's going to be hard to cut.
Oh, I'm sorry. I tend to yammer on.
No, not that kind of hard to cut. It's going to be hard to cut because I am going to be attached to the things you said. Like,
Are there like captions or transcripts or anything?
there are. There are
That's so
indeed.
exciting. You are the best. That means I can share this stuff and be like, hey, everybody, you can all access it.
And I've tried in general to make it as accessible as I know how, but I'm
Yeah,
learning this
no,
whole video editing thing, so we'll find out.
no,
Um,
that's cool. I'm so excited.
so so hey, by the way, if you're watching my video and you see something I could be doing to better, please tell me because I will
Okay.
try to do it. Um,
Thank you.
but this has been fabulous. Thank you so
Yay.
much.